Hearing someone call his name, and it wasn't Huiming, Huijing, or the young monk, Duanling Tian couldn't help but feel curious, while simultaneously looking in the direction of the voice. With just one glance, he saw a somewhat familiar figure, one he seemed to have met before. Uchen? When he saw the young man standing among the group from Cloud-Soaring Temple, Duanling Tian raised an eyebrow, finally remembering the identity of this lay disciple of Cloud-Soaring Temple. Wu Chen, the number 1 young talent of the Great Chu dynasty, whom he had met once at the 10 Dynasty martial arts meet. He still remembered that Wu Chen was the first among the young talents from the 10 dynasties to choose to join Cloud-Soaring Temple after the 10 Dynasty martial arts meet. Concluded. Seeing someone here who was also a young talent from the 10 dynasties, Duanling Tian couldn't help but feel a sense of familiarity. Duanling Tian? Hao Chen's voice also startled Huiming, Huijing, and the young monk accompanying them. Their gazes fell upon Duanling Tian. They were all quite surprised that Duanling Tian was not among the group from the 5 Elements sect. As far as they knew, after the 10 Dynasty martial arts meet concluded, Duanling Tian seemed to have joined the Saber Sword sect, and logically, he should have come with the people from the Saber Sword sect. But now, the Saber Sword sect's people hadn't arrived yet, and Duanling Tian had appeared, and he was with the people from the 5 Elements sect. The 5 Elements sect, one of the 3 major forces in the region east of the Northern Desert. This much they knew. Duanling Tian, we meet. Again. A familiar voice, condensed from elemental energy, suddenly reached Duanling Tian's ears. Immediately, Duanling Tian recognized it as the voice of the young monk standing beside Huiming and Huijing. Indeed, we meet again, but I still don't know what to call you. Duanling Tian met the young monk's gaze with a calm expression, responding with a condensed elemental energy message. My name is Chuan Bei. The young monk continued to speak via condensed elemental energy. Chuan? Bei? I'll remember that, Duanling Tian replied again. Don't forget, we still have an agreement, Chuan Bei added. Of course, I haven't forgotten, Duanling Tian replied. He remembered that during the 10 Dynasty martial arts meet, this Chuan Bei had challenged him, and at the time, he had agreed without a second thought. It was just that, until now, that challenge had not yet materialized. That's good, Chuan Bei nodded in satisfaction. So you are young benefactor Duan. I've heard much about you. Just as most people's gazes were fixed on Duanling Tian, a loud voice suddenly came, startling many people. It was the abbot of Cloud-Soaring Temple, Hui Kong, who looked at Duanling Tian and greeted him with clasped hands. Abbot, you are too kind. Seeing Hui Kong, the leader of one of the 4 major forces in the region, south of the Northern Desert, actively greeting him, Duanling Tian was surprised, but not particularly puzzled. Presumably, Huiming and Huijing had already told Hui Kong everything about him. In the eyes of Huiming and Huijing, he was an anomaly who could use innate abilities, and in terms of talent and strength, he far surpassed ordinary martial artists. Hui Kong greeting him was probably more because he was an anomaly with no other intentions. Only a few people were surprised when O Chen greeted Duanling Tian, but Hui Kong actively greeting Duanling Tian and even saying words like, I've heard much about you, startled everyone present. Who was Hui Kong? The abbot of Cloud-Soaring Temple, a void-prying stage pinnacle expert. Such an existence was now actively greeting a disciple of the 5 Elements sect who looked to be only about 25 years old. It made them all incredibly surprised. Even the 5 Elements sect master, Guo Chong, couldn't help but be greatly astonished at this moment. He knew this old monk, Hui Kong, very well, and understood that if it wasn't someone Hui Kong thought highly of, Hui Kong would absolutely not take the initiative to greet them. In other words, Duanling Tian had caught Hui Kong's eye. Abbot Hui Kong, you've heard of Duanling Tian before? Guo Chong couldn't help but ask Hui Kong out of curiosity. Yes. Hui Kong nodded gently, then continued, although I don't know how young benefactor Duan joined the 5 Elements sect. With young benefactor Duan's help this time, the 5 Elements sect will surely be like a tiger with wings. Sected. Master Guo, congratulations. Abbot Hui Kong has good insight. Guo Chong couldn't help but laugh heartily at these words. He was very confident in Duanling Tian's strength. Currently, among the younger generation of the 5 Elements sect, if Duanling Tian claimed to be second, no one would dare to claim to be first. Of course, many people in Cloud-Soaring Temple still looked at Duanling Tian with doubt. They simply couldn't understand why such a young man, who appeared to be only about 25 years old, would receive such exaggerated praise from their abbot. The abbot hasn't made a mistake, has he? Him? Making the 5 Elements sect like a tiger with wings? Many lay disciples of Cloud-Soaring Temple whispered among themselves, expressing their doubts. What 5 Elements sect? Cloud-Soaring Temple? It seems your 2 major forces truly have no one. A mere young lad under 30, and you treat him like a treasure, it's truly laughable. A cold snort full of disdain, accompanied by a not too loud, not too soft voice, came from the group of people in the distance. Everyone from the Five Elements sect and cloud-soaring temple, including Duanling Tian, couldn't help but look over, only to find that the speaker was the leader of that group, an old man dressed in black. The old man's face was stern, and his sharp eyes seemed to flicker with chilling glints, making people afraid to meet his gaze easily. Like the old man, the other 4 old men behind him and the remaining 20 young men and women were all dressed in black, with a badge pinned to the chest of their black robes. The emblem on the leading old man's chest badge was a scorching sun. The emblems on the chest badges of the 4 old men standing side by side behind him were bright moons, as for the remaining 20 young men and women, the emblems on their chest badges were stars. The Sun Moon sect, one of the 2 major forces in the region west of the northern desert. After seeing the attire of the group before him, Guochong muttered to himself, his gaze then falling on the leading old man, asking, "You must be the sect master of the Sun Moon sect, aren't you?" "Indeed, it is this sect master." The old man responded indifferently. "What is your name, sect master?" Guochong asked again. "Chen Feng," the old man replied, somewhat impatiently. "Sect master Chen Feng." Guochong nodded, then asked, "Just now, you said our 5-element sect has no one?" Chen Feng snorted coldly, disdainfully saying, "Is it not so? A mere young lad, and only your 5-element sect and cloud-soaring temple treat him as a treasure. In our Sun Moon sect, disciples of this age are not even qualified to leave the sect. Young lad, it seems sect master Chen Feng looks down on this disciple of our 5-element sect. I wonder, among the 20 young disciples your sect has brought, how many are confident they can defeat him?" Guochong's eyes narrowed, a smile playing on his lips as he asked directly. Hearing Guochong's words, Duanling Tian shook his head and smiled. He knew that the sect master was planning to use him as a pawn to trick this Sun Moon sect master, and incidentally, to trick that group of Sun Moon sect disciples. Although he didn't like being used as a pawn for some reason, this time Duanling Tian not only didn't resist at all, but instead felt a little anticipation. Perhaps it was because the Sun Moon sect master Chen Feng had used him as a topic to provoke the 5-element sect and cloud-soaring temple just now. Defeat him? Hearing Guochong's words, Chen Feng looked at Duanling Tian, sized him up for a moment, then couldn't help but scoff. Such a young lad, any young disciple from our Sun Moon sect could easily defeat him. Since that's the case, shall we try? Guochong's narrowed eyes suddenly opened wide, the smile on his face growing even broader as he asked directly, Guochong's directness momentarily stunned Chen Feng, who vaguely realized that something seemed amiss. "What's wrong?" "Sectmaster Chen Feng, are you perhaps afraid?" Guochong smiled, a contemptuous smile. "What is there to be afraid of?" Chen Feng was enraged by Guochong. He let out a cold shout, then turned to a Sun Moon sect disciple. "Lu Kai, you come out and meet that young lad from the 5-element sect." The Sun Moon sect disciple who was called out was a young man who looked to be around 35 years old, with a gaunt physique and an indifferent expression. Coupled with his black attire, he exuded a chilling aura. "Yes." Lu Kai responded to Chen Feng's words and shot out into the air, his emotionless eyes immediately locking onto Duanling Tian's position. Duanling Tian's expression changed slightly. The opponent's mere gaze gave him a feeling of falling into an ice cellar, clearly indicating formidable strength. The next moment, Duanling Tian's spiritual force extended out, and he immediately detected the opponent's cultivation, that 9th level of the void prying stage. Duanling Tian had never expected that Chen Feng would be so cautious, immediately sending out a 9th level void prying stage young disciple from his Sun Moon sect to fight him. The strength of this young disciple was probably among the top ranks of the 20 young disciples in the Sun Moon sect. Whoosh! Under everyone's watchful eyes, Duanling Tian flew out, standing opposite Lu Kai with a calm expression, showing no emotions. At this moment, whether they were disciples of the 5-element sect, Cloud-Soaring Temple, or the Sun Moon sect, they all stared intently at the 2 confronting figures, anticipating their battle. "Sect Master Chen Feng, this is our first meeting today. If our disciples spar and compete, how about we each put up some stakes?" Seeing Duanling Tian and Lu Kai on the verge of battle, Guochong looked at Chen Feng. "That suits me perfectly." Hearing Guochong's words, Chen Feng sneered. He raised his hand, and a fragment exuding a sharp sword and key appeared in his palm. "This 9th level sword intent fragment will be the stake for my Sun Moon sect this time. A fragment of the 9th level sword concept." Upon hearing Chen Feng's words and seeing the concept fragment in his hand, many from the 5-element sect and Cloud Sky Temple were startled. They hadn't expected the leader of the Sun Moon sect to possess such courage. A ninth-level concept fragment, even for their respective sects, was an extremely valuable existence. After all, their sects were merely third-rate forces in the cloud-soaring continent, and the strongest among them had only comprehended the ninth-level void transformation concept. The ninth-level concept fragments, held by their sects, were either left behind by deceased ancestors or obtained by killing martial artists who had comprehended the ninth-level void transformation concept. For a third-rate force, killing someone who had comprehended the ninth-level void transformation concept was no simple feat. Yet now, Chen Feng, the leader of the Sun Moon sect, had taken out a ninth-level sword concept fragment as the prize for the battle between their disciple Lu Kai and the five-element sect's disciple, Duanling Tian. If Duanling Tian won, he would have to hand over this ninth-level sword concept fragment to the five-element sect. Sect leader Chen Feng has great courage. Seeing Chen Feng produce a ninth-level sword concept fragment as the wager, Guochong, the leader of the five-element sect, showed a look of surprise before exclaiming in admiration, "What? Sect leader Guo, are you satisfied with the prize I've offered?" Seeing the surprise on Guochong's face, Chen Feng simply assumed Guochong was intimidated by him, and a hint of disdain appeared between his brows. "Stingy!" Before Guochong could speak, a brazen voice broke the brief silence, directly calling Chen Feng, the leader of the Sun Moon sect, stingy. Stingy? Offering a ninth-level concept fragment as a prize, and still being called stingy? Who had such nerve? Immediately, the eyes of everyone from the three major forces simultaneously fell upon the source of the voice. Standing there was a young man dressed in purple. It was Duanling Tian. Duanling Tian said the Sun Moon sect leader is stingy. Many from the Cloud Sky Temple widened their eyes in shock, their faces filled with disbelief. In their opinion, a ninth-level concept fragment was no ordinary item, not to mention in the eyes of a mere five-element sect disciple, but even in the eyes of the five-element sect leader. Facing someone who offered a ninth-level concept fragment as a wager, even the five-element sect leader would likely not call the other party stingy. Is this Duanling Tian crazy? That's a ninth-level concept fragment. I think he's saying this on purpose, intending to make things difficult for the Sun Moon sect leader. No matter what prize the Sun Moon sect leader offers, he can still call him stingy. Then he can use that as an excuse not to fight. If that's true, then this Duanling Tian from the five-element sect is too devious. Many lay disciples of the Cloud Sky Temple whispered among themselves. Although their voices were not loud, they were still clearly heard by everyone present. The disciples of the five-element sect, however, scoffed at the words of these lay disciples from the Cloud Sky Temple, not taking them seriously. They knew Duanling Tian's strength, and he would absolutely not back down in front of a mere Sun Moon sect disciple, let alone back down in such a roundabout way. What is Duanling Tian doing? The Sun Moon sect leader offered a ninth-level concept fragment, yet he actually called the other party stingy? Huangda Niu, Nangong Yi, Tan Huan, Tianzhen, and others exchanged glances, seeing the same confusion in each other's eyes. The peak masters of the fire, water, and earth peaks also looked puzzled. Only Qi Yu, the peak master of the wood peak, smiled knowingly, as if he had guessed what Duanling Tian intended to do next. This little fellow is truly greedy, isn't he? Guochong was startled at first, then seemed to recall something, giving Duanling Tian's back a deep look without saying anything more. Ridiculous. How dare you call our sect leader stingy? That's a ninth-level concept fragment. You, a mere five-element sect brat, have probably never even seen one in your life, have you? Many Sun Moon sect disciples reacted, glaring at Duanling Tian and sneering. If you have the guts, you should also produce a ninth-level concept fragment, or something of higher value. Otherwise, you're just a coward, afraid to fight senior brother Lu Kai. Let him produce a ninth-level concept fragment. I think even if you killed him, he wouldn't be able to. As I see it, he's just afraid of senior brother Lu Kai, which is why he's trying to find an excuse to avoid fighting him. A group of Sun Moon sect disciples began to discuss, their words filled with disdain for Duanling Tian, the five-element Haoestinua sect disciple. In their opinion, a young man who looked to be only around 25 years old, no matter how strong his talent or how high his comprehension, how strong could he possibly be? As Chen Feng raised his hand, the group of Sun Moon sect disciples finally quieted down, but their gazes towards Duanling Tian were still filled with disdain, a disdain that stemmed from their hearts. You said I'm stingy? Chen Feng narrowed his eyes, looking directly at Duanling Tian, and asked in a deep voice, Am I wrong? Duanling Tian seemed not to have heard the taunts from the group of Sun Moon sect disciples. Now, hearing Chen Feng's question, he said, as a matter of course, "The esteemed leader of the Sun Moon sect, only offering a 9th level concept fragment as a prize? Don't you think you're being stingy?" A sharp glint flashed in Chen Feng's eyes, and he snorted. "This 9th level sword concept fragment in my hand is merely the initial prize I've offered. If Sect Leader Guo feels it's not enough, I can add some more prizes." Of course it's not enough. As soon as Chen Feng finished speaking, Duanling Tian immediately responded, "Not to mention our sect leader, even I, an unknown nobody from the Five Elements sect, feel that the prize you've offered is insufficient. You also said you're an unknown nobody. Can you represent your Five Elements sect leader?" Chen Feng sneered. "I naturally cannot represent our sect leader. However, I can bet with you myself." Duanling Tian raised an eyebrow and said, word by word, "You bet with me yourself?" Hearing Duanling Tian's words, Chen Feng couldn't help but be stunned. "I'm dying of laughter. This Five-Element sect brat says he wants to bet with our sect leader himself. Does he really think 9th level concept fragments are cabbages? First he calls the sect leader stingy, now he says he wants to bet with the sect leader himself. I'd like to see what he can possibly bring to bet with the sect leader." The Sun Moon sect disciples became agitated again, each one looking at Duanling Tian with a sneer, waiting for him to make a fool of himself. This Duanling Tian is crazy. Now, if he can't produce something of greater value than the 9th level sword concept fragment, he's going to make a huge fool of himself. He's definitely going to make a huge fool of himself. The group of lay disciples from the Cloud Sky Temple shook their heads, looking at Duanling Tian with pity. The abbot of Cloud Sky Temple, Huikong, stood to the side, gazing at Duanling Tian with a benevolent expression. Even with Duanling Tian making such a bold claim, he didn't show the slightest surprise. On the other hand, many disciples of the Five Element sect started to laugh. They didn't know about other things. But when it came to 9th level concept fragments, Duanling Tian certainly wasn't lacking, having even recently obtained 2, which came from Ren Ji, the killed leader of the Crimson Moon sect. "That's right, I'll bet with you myself." Duanling Tian looked directly at Chen Feng, nodding earnestly. "Young man, do you know the value of this 9th level sword concept fragment in my hand? Let me tell you, not just anything can compare to the value of this concept fragment in my hand." Chen Feng weighed the fragment in his hand and sneered. "I don't know about other things, but I do know that these 2 items combined are definitely worth more than the 9th level sword concept fragment in your hand." Facing Chen Feng's sneer, Duanling Tian's expression was calm. As he raised his hand, 2 fragments appeared in his palm, one azure and one purple. Both the azure and purple fragments had such profound colors that one couldn't help but be startled at first glance. "Sect leader Chen Feng, what do you think?" Duanling Tian weighed the 2 fragments in his hand and smiled faintly. 9th level wind concept fragment, 9th level thunder concept fragment. Just as Chen Feng's gaze was completely captivated by the concept fragments in Duanling Tian's hand, several vice leaders of the Sun Moon sect standing behind Chen Feng changed color and exclaimed, "It really is a 9th level wind concept fragment and a 9th level thunder concept fragment." Over at the Cloud Sky Temple, Huijing couldn't help but gasp. Earlier, Duanling Tian's uninhibited behavior had made him break out in a cold sweat for Duanling Tian, thinking that Duanling Tian was about to make a fool of himself in front of everyone. But now, he realized that Duanling Tian's earlier audacity was entirely due to his confidence. This could be seen from the fact that he now casually produced 2 9th level concept fragments. Are those really 2 9th level concept fragments? The sneering expressions on the faces of the group of Sun Moon sect disciples completely froze, their faces turning red as if they had been choked, unable to utter a sound for a long time. Heavens, who exactly is this Duanling Tian? He can just casually produce 2 9th level concept fragments? He wouldn't be the illegitimate son of the Five Element sect leader, would he? How can he possibly have 2 9th level concept fragments? The group of lay disciples from the Cloud Sky Temple, one by one, looked at the 2 concept fragments in Duanling Tian's hand, their eyes completely red, wishing they could just snatch them away. In contrast, the people from the Five Element sect appeared much calmer. This Duanling Tian, taking out 2 9th level concept fragments at this time, is he trying to trick the Sun Moon sect leader into giving him another 9th level concept fragment? Huang Da-Niu looked stunned, vaguely guessing something. Many others shared his thoughts, such as the Peak Masters of the Water, Fire, and Earth Peaks, as well as the Nangong brothers, Tan Huan, Tianzhen, and others. Duanling Tian, you want to trick that Sun Moon sect leader, but I won't let you succeed. A cold glint flashed in Hu Fei's eyes and a sneer played on his lips. Sect leader Chen Feng, if I present these two 9th level profundity fragments as the stakes for my battle with Lu Kai, a disciple of your Sun Moon sect? Should you not also present a 9th level profundity fragment? Duanling Tian stared at Chen Feng, speaking each word clearly. Chen Feng snapped back to reality, his expression darkening. He never expected that the purple-clad young man before him would be able to produce two 9th level profundity fragments, and challenge him to a bet with two 9th level profundity fragments as the wager. As the sect leader of the Sun Moon sect, he was certainly no fool. Since the other party dared to make this bet and was willing to put up two 9th level profundity fragments as stakes, he must be full of confidence. For a moment, Chen Feng found himself in a difficult position, producing another 9th level profundity fragment was not difficult for him. But the problem was, if the purple-clad young man in front of him won, their Sun Moon sect would not only lose face, but also two 9th level profundity fragments. He had only produced one 9th level profundity fragment earlier, because he believed his side would win, hoping to win another 9th level profundity fragment from the 5-element sect with it. However, the subsequent turn of events was beyond his expectations. First, this purple-clad young man in front of him called him stingy, and then even stepped forward to challenge him to a bet with two 9th level profundity fragments as the wager. It must be said that seeing the other party's confident expression, he hesitated. Although he couldn't believe that a young man of such an age could defeat Lu Kai, a 9th level void transformation stage existence, a disciple of his Sun Moon sect, he still couldn't believe it. But when he thought about the two 9th level profundity fragments involved, he had to be extremely cautious. What? Sect leader Chen Feng, you're not scared, are you? Seeing Chen Feng's hesitation, Duanling Tian easily guessed his thoughts and couldn't help but laugh, deliberately raising his voice so that everyone could hear. Towards the end, a hint of disdain appeared at the corners of Duanling Tian's mouth. Scared? Hearing Duanling Tian's words and sensing the gazes from all around, Chen Feng immediately flew into a rage. However, just as his anger surged, it was as if a basin of cold water had been poured over him and he completely calmed down. He vaguely realized that this was the other party's provocation. Just then, a sound transmission of vital energy came from afar, piercing into Chen Feng's ear. Sect leader. Chen Feng, absolutely do not agree to this, Duanling Tian. Don't be fooled by his appearance. In fact, he is a first-level void amalgamation, stage martial artist who, in addition to comprehending one void amalgamation profundity, has also comprehended three 9th-level void transformation profundities. Currently, this Duanling Tian is trying to provoke you, to make you agree to him in your extreme anger. You must not fall for his trick. Otherwise, your Sun Moon sect will definitely lose two 9th-level profundity fragments. The vital energy sound transmission stopped abruptly there. Chen Feng's face changed drastically when he heard the vital energy sound transmission. First-level void amalgamation stage. Comprehended one void amalgamation profundity and three 9th-level void transformation profundities. Taking a deep breath, Chen Feng sized up the purple-clad young man in front of him, constantly asking himself, does this Duanling Tian really have such great abilities? He couldn't believe it. In his opinion, this was almost impossible. A first-level void amalgamation stage martial artist comprehending a void amalgamation profundity was inevitable, and comprehending one more 9th-level void transformation. Profundity would already be considered a monstrous talent. Yet, that vital energy sound transmission claimed that Duanling Tian, in addition to being a first-level void amalgamation stage martial artist, who comprehended a void amalgamation profundity, had also comprehended three void transformation profundities. Absurd. Too absurd. Chen Feng shook his head, immediately concluding that the other party was deceiving him. Moreover, that vital energy sound transmission came from among the group of people from the 5-element sect. Unfortunately, the vital energy sound transmission came so suddenly that he couldn't identify which 5-element sect disciple it belonged to. But he could be certain of one thing. The other party was lying to him. As for the purpose of the lie, he could easily guess. The other party was doing this simply because they didn't want him to gamble with Duanling Tian, and they wanted his Sun Moon sect to back down in front of the 5-element sect and even make a fool of themselves in front of the people from Cloud Sky Temple. The other party's actions seemed to be helping him, trying to help him preserve the two 9th-level profundity fragments. But if one were to delve deeper and think about it more profoundly, the other party's actions were actually helping Duanling Tian and the 5-element sect, because if he refused now, Duanling Tian would not be defeated by his Sun Moon sect's disciple in front of everyone, and the 5-element sect would win without a fight, firmly suppressing their Sun Moon sect. Duanling Tian, I must say, you are very clever. Chen Feng looked at Duanling Tian and said via vital energy sound transmission, You actually know how to advance by retreating, having someone exaggerate your strength in front of me, wanting me and my Sun Moon sect to retreat in the face of difficulty, allowing you and the Five Element sect to win without a fight. If it were someone from Cloud Sky Temple reminding me with a vital energy sound transmission, I might believe it. But you actually had someone from your Five Element sect remind me with a vital energy sound transmission. How foolish, Chen. Feng's vital energy sound transmission was full of disdain. Hearing Chen Feng's vital energy sound transmission, Duanling Tian couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. He had someone from the Five Element sect use vital energy sound transmission to exaggerate his strength in front of Chen Feng. At first, Duanling Tian was a little confused, and he couldn't help but look curiously at the group of people from the Five Element sect. And soon, he discovered something amiss. When he looked at Hu Fei, he noticed that Hu Fei's gaze seemed to deliberately avoid him, not daring to meet his eyes, which was out of character. Hu Fei! A cold glint flashed in Duanling Tian's eyes, and anger surged in his heart. At this moment, he could conclude that the person Chen Feng mentioned, who reminded him with vital energy, sound transmission was none other than Hu Fei. However, Chen Feng didn't seem to believe Hu Fei's words. This made Duanling Tian breathe a sigh of relief. While sighing in relief, the killing intent in the depths of Duanling Tian's eyes grew even stronger, directed at Hu Fei. Indeed, as he had thought before, as long as Hu Fei was alive, he would never have a moment of peace. What a pity, what a real pity. Originally, seeing you so confidently take out 2 9th-level profundity fragments to bet with me, I was still a bit hesitant. At that time, I even thought that in order to preserve the 2 9th-level profundity fragments, even if it meant losing face for me and the Sun Moon sect, I would refuse the bet you proposed. Chen Feng's vital energy sound. Transmission continued to enter Duanling Tian's ears, full of smugness. It's just a pity that you actually had someone from the Five Element sect remind me with vital energy sound transmission, exaggerating your strength, and not just exaggerating, but exaggerating so ridiculously. Therefore, today it is destined not to be me and the Sun Moon sect who lose face, but you, Duanling Tian, and the Five Element sect. Chen Feng's vital energy sound transmission stopped there. Duanling Tian was speechless. So that Hu Fei had actually helped him? If Hu Fei knew the outcome would be like this, he would probably be so angry that he'd spit 3 liters of blood, wouldn't he? However, Duanling Tian did not extinguish his killing intent towards Hu Fei because of this. In his heart, Hu Fei was already a dead man, and given the opportunity, he would make Hu Fei die by his hands. Hearing Chen Feng's vital energy sound transmission, Duanling Tian snorted, deliberately darkening his expression. Seeing Duanling Tian's expression, a mocking smile appeared on Chen Feng's face, and with a raise of his hand he took out another profundity fragment. Duanling Tian, since you want to bet big, then I'll bet big with you. Now, this is a 9th level blade profundity fragment, and together with the 9th level sword profundity fragment in my hand, they will be the stakes from our Sun Moon sect's side. Under the watchful eyes of all, Chen Feng said loudly. At the same time, without waiting for Duanling Tian to respond, Chen Feng looked at the abbot of Cloud Sky Temple. Hui Kong, old baldy Hui Kong, although this sect leader has not dealt with you in the past, I have heard that your character is decent. Today, the bet between me and this 5-element sect disciple, Duanling Tian, will have you as the witness. As for the stakes, they should also be kept by you. After speaking, Chen Feng raised his hand and shot out the 2 9th level profundity fragments in his hand, directly towards Hui Kong. Amitabha, since sect leader Chen trusts this humble monk will naturally comply with sect leader Chen's wishes. Hui Kong clasped his hands together after receiving the 2 9th level profundity fragments. Duanling Tian, now, shouldn't you also hand over your stakes to old baldy Hui Kong for safekeeping? Chen Feng looked at Duanling Tian, a smug smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The reason he made such a move was precisely because he was worried that Duanling Tian would go back on his word. If things developed to that point, although Duanling Tian and the 5-element sect would lose face, his Sun Moon sect would not obtain the 2 profundity fragments in Duanling Tian's hands. Now, by doing this, he wanted to put Duanling Tian in a difficult position. Of course, Duanling Tian could still refuse, but the cost of refusing would be immense, even far exceeding the value of 2 9th level profundity fragments. Once Duanling Tian refused in this northern desert land in the future, not only Duanling Tian, but even the 5-element sect would probably not be able to hold their heads high. Sect leader Chen Feng, well played? Duanling Tian naturally guessed Chen Feng's thoughts. After giving Chen Feng a deep look, he casually shot the 2 9th level profundity fragments towards Hui Kong. Abbot Hui Kong, I trouble you. Amitabha, little benefactor Duan is too kind. Hui Kong clasped his hands together after receiving the two 9th-level profundity fragments. Seeing Duanling Tian so readily hand over the two 9th-level profundity fragments to Hui Kong, Chen Feng couldn't help but frown, but soon his brows relaxed again. In his opinion, Duanling Tian was merely putting on a brave face. He would never believe that a mere youngster like Duanling Tian could defeat Lu Kai, who was among the top 3 of their Sun Moon Sect's younger generation. Whoosh! At this moment, Duanling Tian had already returned to face Lu Kai, confronting the stern-faced Lu Kai. Little benefactor Duan, little benefactor Lu. Although your battle concerns the ownership of 2 9th-level profundity fragments, this humble monk still hopes that you will stop before going too far. Hui Kong looked at Duanling Tian and Lu Kai, clasped his hands together, and advised them, "I have no objection." Duanling Tian shrugged, saying indifferently, in this battle, he only wanted to win those 2 9-layered profound meaning fragments. As for whether he killed anyone, he didn't care. Of course, the most important thing was, up until now, Lu Kai, the young disciple of the Sun Moon Sect, hadn't done anything to provoke Duanling Tian's killing intent. Those who challenge our Sun Moon Sect are doomed to die. Lu Kai's voice was sinister and cold, revealing his intent to kill Duanling Tian. Duanling Tian narrowed his eyes, a cold smile playing on his lips. He had just been wondering if he should spare Lu Kai's life, but Lu Kai's words completely shattered that thought. Everyone must pay the price for the words they speak. Duanling Tian and Lu Kai stood facing each other, confronting each other, instantly attracting everyone's attention. This Duanling Tian can actually produce 2 9-layered, profound meaning fragments. That's truly surprising. However, what's even more surprising is that he dares to gamble with the Sun Moon Sect leader. Does he really think he can defeat that Sun Moon Sect disciple? That Sun Moon Sect disciple, personally named by the Sun Moon Sect leader, must be incredibly strong. This Duanling Tian is probably going to try and steal a chicken, but end up losing his rice. Many lay disciples of Cloud Sky Temple discussed animatedly, clearly not optimistic about Duanling Tian. Of course, in the final analysis, the main reason was that Duanling Tian was too young, frighteningly young. Whoosh! Suddenly, the black robe of Lu Kai, the Sun Moon Sect disciple confronting Duanling Tian, fluttered, and his elemental energy surged, then merged with a sharp aura. In an instant, the rampant elemental energy on Lu Kai's entire body transformed into a giant blade, exuding an aura that seemed capable of cutting through anything. Above the void, the power of heaven and earth surged, and a heavenly phenomenon condensed into form. First, 120 ancient horned dragon phantoms appeared, followed by another 100 ancient horned dragon phantoms. 9th level of the void. Prying stage, 9th level mid-grade blade profound meaning. Lu Kai's strength greatly shocked many disciples of Cloud Sky Temple, further convincing them that Duanling Tian could not defeat Lu Kai. Duanling Tian, I hope you don't disappoint me, Zhuanbei murmured, staring at Duanling Tian's back. Just as a spirit saber as thin as a cicada's wing appeared in Lu Kai's hand, and he was about to strike, he suddenly seemed to sense something, and turned his head to look into the distance. At this moment, everyone, including Duanling Tian, also looked into the distance. There, a group of people was approaching in a mighty procession. A moment later, they arrived near them. Big Brother Duan. A soft and pleasant voice came from among the group of people, clearly filled with a hint of excited joy. Immediately after, under the watchful eyes of all, a figure like a fire spirit flew out, directly towards the purple figure in the distance, moving as fast as lightning. Upon hearing this familiar voice, Duanling Tian's heart couldn't help but flutter. The next moment, before he could even react, he found that a fiery red figure had already arrived in front of him, standing opposite him, their eyes meeting. The person standing before Duanling Tian now was a woman of breathtaking beauty. On her face, a captivating smile bloomed, momentarily dimming everything around her. Tian Wu. Duanling Tian smiled faintly, looking at the red-clad woman before him. The person who had arrived was none other than Feng Tian Wu. Big Brother Duan, why are you here? Feng Tian Wu, excited at seeing the person she had yearned for, calmed her emotions a little, took a deep breath, and asked softly. She had never expected to see her Big Brother Duan here. Logically, shouldn't Big Brother Duan have been taken away by a Martial Emperor powerhouse? Duanling Tian, Brotherling Tian! At this moment, 2 figures followed Feng Tian Wu, appearing before Duanling Tian, their faces showing surprise and joy, clearly not expecting to meet Duanling Tian here. Su Li, Big Brother Zhang. Duanling Tian smiled and greeted the 2. The 2 people who appeared before Duanling Tian now were none other than Su Li and Zhang Shouyong. Duanling Tian, where have you been all this time? Why are you here? Suli couldn't help but ask curiously. Although Zhang Shouyang didn't ask, his puzzled gaze undoubtedly showed that he was also very concerned about this. The whole thing is a long story. I'll tell you in detail when we have time later. As for why I'm here, my purpose is naturally the same as yours. Duanling Tian shook his head, then added, however, there's one difference. You represent the saber and sword sect, and I represent the 5-element sect. 5-element sect. Hearing Duanling Tian's words, Suli couldn't help but be surprised. Is that the 5-element sect? One of the 3 major powers in the eastern region of the northern desert? Yes. Duanling Tian nodded with a smile. Big brother Duan, why did you go to the 5 elements? Sect? A hint of confusion appeared on Feng Tianwu's pretty face. Before Duanling Tian could answer, one of the 4 leading middle-aged men among the recently arrived group of people, his eyes flashed, and his gaze fell on Duanling Tian. Duanling Tian. The middle-aged man greeted Duanling Tian. Hearing the voice, Duanling Tian looked at the middle-aged man. His eyes lit up, and he greeted him with some surprise. Senior. The middle-aged man was none other than the vice-sect leader of the sword sect, of the saber and sword sect, and also Suli's master, Jian Shisan. Jian Shisan had shown him kindness, and he had always kept it in his heart. You just said that you are here this time representing the 5-element sect? Jian Shisan frowned slightly and asked, Yes. Duanling Tian nodded, then apologized. Senior, I'm truly sorry. Because the 5-elements sect has been kind to me this time, when I enter the Martial Emperor's hidden treasure, I will have to exert myself for the 5-elements sect. I won't be able to represent the saber and sword sect. The group from the 5-elements sect, seeing that many of the newly arrived people recognized Duanling Tian, were all somewhat surprised. Now, hearing the conversation between Duanling Tian and Jian Shisan, they were even more surprised. In the past, Duanling Tian was preparing to enter the Martial Emperor's hidden treasure on behalf of the saber and sword sect. Although they didn't know what happened later, now hearing Duanling Tian's words, they couldn't help but feel somewhat fortunate. In their eyes, Duanling Tian was a great weapon. With Duanling Tian, the 5-elements sect would undoubtedly gain the greatest benefits in the Martial Emperor's hidden treasure. Before Jian Shisan could speak, a cold snort sounded. Immediately after, among the group from the saber and sword sect, a green figure shot out. It was a green-clad young man, one of the 20 young disciples of the saber and sword sect, who had come this time. After the green-clad young man came out, he immediately looked at Duanling Tian and asked in a deep voice, Are you Duanling Tian? Who are you? Facing the unfriendly green-clad young man, Duanling Tian frowned. You don't need to know who I am. You just need to answer me. Did you once promise Uncle Master Jian to join our saber and sword sect and even enter the sword sect? The green-clad young man swept a disdainful glance at Duanling Tian, and then, in a deep voice, asked again, Yes, but Duanling Tian nodded, just about to explain, when he was directly interrupted by the green-clad young man. Yes is enough. That is to say, you, a prospective sword sect disciple of our saber and sword sect, defected to the 5 elements. Sect. Even if you are only a prospective sword sect disciple, a prospective disciple defecting to another sect is, according to our saber and sword sect's rules, considered a traitor. Today, I, Lian Xiong, will enforce the sect's rules on behalf of the enforcement elder and eliminate you, this traitor. Lian Xiong, the green-clad young man, spoke very quickly. Before everyone could react, he had already transformed into a green lightning bolt shooting directly towards Duanling Tian. Whoosh! Accompanying his charge towards Duanling Tian was a swift sword light, which, in a blink of an eye, had already reached Duanling Tian's glabella. The speed of the sword light was terrifying. Whoosh! At the same time, above the void above Lian, Xiong's head, more than 270 ancient horned dragon phantoms appeared. That is to say, the sword he thrust towards Duanling Tian contained the power of more than 270 ancient horned dragons. 8th level of the void prying stage. 8th level mid-grade sword, profound meaning. 3rd grade spirit sword. The green-clad young man's speed, in the eyes of most people present, was astonishingly fast, but in Duanling Tian's eyes, it was pitifully slow. Seeing the 3rd grade spirit sword in the green-clad young man's hand just inches from his glabella, Duanling Tian was already preparing to reach out and grab the sword. For him, stopping the sword empty-handed presented no pressure. However, just as Duanling Tian was about to make his move, he heard a fleeting, sharp whistling sound. Crack! At the same time, a snapping sound entered Duanling Tian's ears. Immediately after, Duanling Tian saw the sword, which was almost within reach of his glabella, vanish from his sight in an instant. To be precise, it flew out into the distant sky. Flying with it was an arm that had been forcibly torn off, blood gushing out from the severed end, dazzling and bright. Blood splattered across the sky, forming crimson roses. Ah, at the same time. A shrill scream echoed. It was Lian Xiong, who was standing not far from Duanling Tian, holding his hand to the severed shoulder where his arm had been, trying to stop the bleeding while screaming in agony. Who? When he caught his breath, he glared angrily at the person who had attacked him. However, when he saw the red-clad woman holding a long whip like a red spirit snake, standing there, his expression changed again. Feng, junior sister Feng, he betrayed the sect and deserves to die to atone for his crime. Why? Why are you helping him? The person who had crippled Lian Xiong was none other than Feng Tianwu. Feng Tianwu was also the first to react and timely stop Lian Xiong. With a whip, she lashed out, wrapping it around the arm of Lian Xiong's sword-wielding hand. The next moment, she tore the arm clean off Lian Xiong's shoulder and flung it away, the entire action as smooth as flowing water. Because he is my big brother Duan. Feng Tianwu's answer was simple, direct, and decisive. Because he's my elder brother Duan. Feng Tianwu's short sentence made many young men from various forces look at Duanling Tian with jealousy, wishing they could take his place. This moment, anyone who wasn't blind could see Feng Tianwu's affection for Duanling Tian. That guy Duanling Tian truly has a way with women, Huang Danyo said with an envious look. When they first saw a peerless beauty like Feng Tianwu, including him, they couldn't help but be moved. Junior sister Feng, you'll regret this, Lian Xiong said to Feng Tianwu with a look of jealousy and gritted teeth, then flew away to retrieve the arm that Feng Tianwu had torn off and thrown. If he could find and reattach his arm in time, there might still be a chance for it to recover. When that sword and saber sect disciple attacked earlier, he drew upon the power of heaven and earth, condensing over 270 ancient horned dragon phantoms. His strength is formidable, yet he still had an arm severed by this sword and saber sect female disciple, who looks like a fairy. This sword and saber sect female disciple appears to be only in her early 20s. To possess such terrifying strength at such a young age is astonishing. She truly is a darling of heaven. Not only does she possess a beauty that can topple nations and mesmerize all, but she also has a talent and comprehension that makes others envious. Whether they were young disciples from the Five Element sect, Yunkong Temple, or Sun Moon sect, they couldn't help but whisper among themselves. The shock Feng Tianwu brought them was too great, although Feng Tianwu's attack was swift and didn't even draw upon the power of heaven and earth to manifest a celestial phenomenon. They could tell that her strength far surpassed that of the sword and saber sect disciple whose arm she had crippled. Tianwu, this time, you went a bit too far. The thin old man, one of the two elders leading the sword and saber sect, looked at Feng Tianwu with a hint of blame. Sect master, I held back just now. Otherwise, he would already be a corpse. Facing the old man's blame, Feng Tianwu responded unhurriedly, her voice revealing a hint of coldness. As the saying goes, a dragon has a reverse scale. Touch it, and you die. In her world, Duanling Tian was her reverse scale. The reason she didn't kill Lian Xiong today was because her father, Feng Wudao, was currently the elder of the saber sect, in the sword and saber sect, and she didn't want to make things difficult for her father. Sect master of the sword and saber sect? Although he didn't know if this old man was the sect master of the saber sect or the sword sect, Duanling Tian's impression of him was very poor. What did he mean by went a bit too far? That sword and saber sect disciple, Lian Xiong had tried to kill him with his first move, his sword just inches from his brow, almost taking his life. If Tianwu hadn't acted first, and he had been the one to strike, Lian Xiong would already be a corpse. Now, Lian Xiong had only lost an arm, and this old man was actually blaming Tianwu for going too far. You are Duanling Tian, my sword sect's prospective disciple. Soon the old man's gaze shifted from Feng Tianwu to Duanling Tian, asking in an extremely flat tone, his voice sounding somewhat cold. From now on, I, Duanling Tian, am no longer a prospective disciple of the sword and saber sect. Duan. Ling Tian looked at the old man calmly, announcing faintly. Just now, when he heard the old man blame Feng Tianwu, he had lost all interest in joining the sword and saber sect. Duanling Tian. Hearing Duanling Tian's words, Jian Shisan's expression changed. He never expected Duanling Tian to dare speak to their sect master of the sword sect in such a way, and moreover, to immediately sever ties with the sword and saber sect. After the old man reacted, his face changed, and he said in a deep voice, Do you think our sword and saber sect is something you can join or not join as you please? For me, that is precisely the case, Duanling Tian said indifferently. I agreed to join the sword and saber sect because that senior had shown me kindness. As for now, I have no interest in the sword and saber sect. At this point, Duanling Tian didn't bother to pay attention to the old man anymore, but instead looked at Jian Shisan. Senior, I, Duanling Tian, will repay your kindness someday. As for the sword and saber sect, I will not join it. The old man's attitude just now had made Duanling Tian's heart turn cold, although there might have been other reasons involved, such as Liansheng's identity and background being not simple. In his opinion, those were not excuses. Seeing the determination on Duanling Tian's face, Jian Shisan also realized that the situation was irreversible and didn't know what to say, only able to give a bitter smile. Good. Good. Today, for Tianwu's sake, I won't bother with you. The old man's face turned gloomy with anger from Duanling Tian, and as he spoke, he took a deep breath and continued, Since you are unwilling to join our sword and saber sect, we will not force you. From now on, you are no longer a prospective disciple of our sword and saber sect. Among our sword and saber sect, young powerhouses are abundant. We don't lack one like you. By the end, the old man spoke with a somewhat dispirited air, clearly not putting Duanling Tian in his eyes. That would be even better. Duanling Tian nodded, then turned back to look at Lu Kai, the Sun Moon sect disciple waiting there, and said in a deep voice, Continue. He hadn't forgotten his bet with Chen Feng, the Sun Moon sect leader. It concerned 2 ninth-level intent fragments. He couldn't possibly forget. Elder Brother Duan, what is this? Feng Tianwu glanced at Lu Kai. Although Lu Kai had now retracted his origin energy and intent, she had still seen the strength he displayed when she first arrived. Without using a spirit weapon, he drew upon the power of heaven and earth, condensing 220 ancient horned dragon phantoms. Because of this, Feng Tianwu could tell that Lu Kai was a 9th-level void-prying stage martial artist who had comprehended the 9th-level void-prying intent. It's nothing. He and I have a wager. You just watch from the side. Duanling Tian shook his head, giving Feng Tianwu a reassuring smile. Hearing this, Feng Tianwu obediently stepped back. Duanling Tian, be careful. At this moment, Su Li and Zhang Shouyong also retreated, watching Duanling Tian and the young man in black confront each other from a distance. That young man gave them an extremely dangerous feeling. As Duanling Tian once again confronted Lu Kai's origin energy and saber intent reappeared. At the same time, the group of secular disciples from Yunkong Temple began to discuss again. From the mouths of the Yunkong Temple secular disciples, Feng Tianwu, Su Li, Zhang Shouyong, and others from the Sword and Saber sect quickly understood the full story, and each couldn't help but show surprise. The stake for this wager, for either side, is 2 9th-level intent fragments. That Sun Moon sect disciple, Lu Kai, is a 9th-level void-prying stage martial artist who has comprehended the 9th-level intermediate saber intent. One by one, the Sword and Saber sect disciples discussed animatedly, their faces showing surprise, but also a hint of anticipation for the battle between Duanling Tian and Lu Kai. Of course, most of them felt that Lu Kai had a greater chance of winning. Whoosh! At this moment, a figure swiftly flew from a distance. It was Liansheng, who had gone to retrieve his severed arm, returning. Liansheng's severed arm had already been reattached, but his face was still bloodless and extremely pale, looking no different from a dead man's. Upon his return, Liansheng looked at Feng Tianwu, his eyes filled with extreme coldness deep within. Liansheng, the matter of Tianwu severing your arm ends here. The thin old man, who was the sect and master of the sword sect, glanced at Liansheng indifferently, his tone cold and devoid of any emotion. Sect master? Hearing the old man's words, Liansheng's face changed drastically, and he tried to say something, but was interrupted again by the old man. Did you not hear what I said clearly? Or do you want me to repeat it for you? By the end, the old man's voice sounded as if it came from an ice cave, frightening Liansheng into an involuntary shiver. He shot an unwilling glance at Feng Tianwu, but ultimately dared not harbor any thoughts of revenge. He knew in his heart, unless he no longer wished to stay in the Sword and Saber sect, or if this old man died. Otherwise, he could not seek revenge against Feng Tianwu. If he did, and the old man found out, he would surely die. Taking a deep breath, Liansheng shifted his gaze, beginning to search for Duanling Tian's figure. Soon, he found Duanling Tian confronting a black-clad young man, and that black-clad young man displayed strength far superior to his own, a 9th-level void-prying stage, having comprehended the 9th-level void-prying intent. What's going on? Liansheng couldn't understand why Duanling Tian would confront such a powerful young man. When he learned the reason from others, he couldn't help but sneer inwardly. So that's it. This Duanling Tian is simply courting death. Does he really think he can defeat a 9th-level void-prying stage martial artist who has comprehended the 9th-level void-prying intent? Consider yourself lucky you didn't die by my hand. Liansheng's cold gaze locked onto Duan. Ling Tian's back, a sneer playing at the corner of his lips. However, the next moment, his smile completely froze. Heavens, what did he see? In the distance, Lu Kai, the Sun Moon sect disciple, moved. His spirit saber, as thin as a cicada's wing, trembled, and a surge of power poured into it as he charged towards Duanling Tian. Above the void, over 310 ancient horned dragon phantoms, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws, swept out and pounced on Duanling Tian. Buzz! Wherever the saber light, thin as a cicada's wing, pointed, the air currents parted, stirring up clear, piercing whistles that grew louder and louder, giving an extremely harsh sensation. The saber strike, imbued with the power of over 310 ancient horned dragons, followed like a shadow, attacking Duanling Tian as if to split him in two, tearing him into halves. Facing Lu Kai's fierce saber strike, Duanling Tian's eyes were filled with chilling coldness, and then he suddenly took a step forward. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, Duanling Tian moved. His right hand formed a fist, pulling back sharply, his broad back arching like a powerful bow. Suddenly, whoosh, as Duanling Tian's sturdy back trembled. His fist shot out like a cannonball, meeting the rapidly approaching saber light. Seeing Duanling Tian smash out an empty-handed punch towards Lu Kai, the Sun Moon sect disciple, who was wielding a Grade 2 spirit saber, as thin as a cicada's wing, most people, except for those from the Five Elements sect, couldn't help but feel their scalps tingle. However, this sensation didn't last long. Whoosh! Around Duanling Tian's fist, which shot out like a cannonball, a wisp of raging elemental energy instantly surged, and the moment it appeared, it underwent a dramatic transformation. The milky white elemental energy transformed into a vast and majestic earthy yellow power. Around this earthy yellow power, thunderbolts thick as purple electric snakes crackled, and a series of sharp auras emanated from it. Not only that, but solid gales also entwined around his fist, following it like a shadow. Of course, only the high-ranking officials of the various major forces present, with their astonishing eyesight, could clearly see all these changes. In the eyes of the young disciples of the various major forces, after Duanling Tian punched out, they could no longer clearly see the situation on his fist. They only saw the air currents rapidly moving, compressing, and exploding, creating a series of ear-piercing air blasts that roared like thunder, entering their ears. Boom! 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 The air blasts grew stronger, causing some of the weaker young disciples among the various major forces to feel their eardrums vibrate and their faces turn pale. Some young disciples with insufficient cultivation had their eardrums burst, and streaks of blood shot out from their ears. Boom! Suddenly a loud bang came, causing everyone present to involuntarily shrink their pupils. As the power contained in Duanling Tian's fist met the Grade 2 spirit saber in Lu Kai's hand, it effortlessly sent the Grade 2 spirit saber flying, then enveloped Lu Kai's body. In an instant, Lu Kai's body exploded, turning into a sky full of flesh and blood, with no complete peace to be found. He was beyond dead. Whoosh! After completely crushing and blasting Lu Kai with a single punch, Duanling Tian retracted the elemental energy and the four concepts in his hand, and the turbulent heaven and earth energy above his head dissipated. Because he acted in the blink of an eye, the heaven and earth phenomenon had not yet had time to condense into form before it dispersed again. Duanling Tian stood in the air, and not far in front of him, blood rained down like fireworks blooming, celebrating his final victory in this gambling battle. The fireworks filled the sky, looking extremely magnificent, dazzling, and brilliant. Duanling Tian's purple robes fluttered in the wind, and he stood there, appearing incredibly tall in the eyes of the onlookers. Hiss, 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 hiss. A series of gasps suddenly rose and fell, continuous and unending. This Duanling Tian is so strong. His strength is too terrifying, isn't it? With just one punch, he blasted that Sun Moon sect disciple, who had comprehended the 9th level void prying concept. How old is he? He's simply a monster. For a time, whether they were disciples of Cloud Sky Temple, Sun Moon sect, or Blade and Sword sect, they couldn't help but whisper. In their words, when they mentioned Duanling Tian, there was a hint of fear that came from the bottom of their hearts. Brother Duan. Feng Tianwu's eyes lit up, and a captivating smile appeared on her pretty face. Her graceful figure stood there, her radiant smile making her look like a beautiful painting. Although Feng Tianwu had always had great confidence in Duanling Tian, when she truly saw him display such powerful strength and kill his opponent with a single punch, she still couldn't help but feel happy for him. Duanling Tian's strength has actually become so strong? Suli's pupils constricted, his face full of shock. I thought that when we met again, I could narrow the gap between us. Who would have thought that he had already left me far behind? Duanling Tian, with a single punch, killed a void-prying stage 9th level martial artist who had comprehended the 9th level void-prying concept, which filled him with an inexplicable shock from the bottom of his heart. Zhang Shouyang's pupils also constricted. Although he didn't speak, his current expression was enough to show his inner shock. Duanling Tian, one could say, was someone he had watched rise step by step to this day. The young man who, in the past, needed his help to survive in the Qiong restaurant in Tianhuang ancient city, had unknowingly grown to a point where even he had to look up to him. 30 years to the east of the river, 30 years to the west of the river. Brother Ling Tian, now that I recall the first time we met, it truly feels like the world has changed, Zhang Shouyang murmured in his heart. On the blade and sword sect side, it wasn't just Feng Tianwu, Su Li, and Zhang Shouyang who were shocked. Even Jian Shisan and the other 3 high-ranking members of the blade and sword sect who had come couldn't help but show expressions of shock. In just a few months, Duanling Tian's strength has increased to such a degree, he's truly a monster, Jian Shisan sighed. As expected of an anomaly, Dao Wu, standing not far away, nodded in agreement. Anomaly? Dao Wu's words caused the eyes of the 2 old men standing nearby to narrow. The burly old man looked at Dao Wu and asked in a deep voice, Dao Wu, you said Duanling Tian is an anomaly? Yes. Dao Wu nodded. He is an anomaly who can unleash innate divine abilities. An anomaly who can unleash innate divine abilities? The burly old man, who was the blade sect master of the blade and sword sect, gasped. The thin old man standing beside him, who was the sword sect master, subtly trembled and then stiffened a bit. At this moment he only felt his face burning. In his ears he seemed to hear the words he had just said to Duanling Tian. Our blade and sword sect has many young powerhouses, and we don't lack one more of you. Now he only wanted to slap himself. The reason he had said that earlier was because he didn't know how terrifying Duanling Tian's strength was, and even less did he know that Duanling Tian was 1 in a million anomaly. You too. Why didn't you say so earlier? The sword sect master glared at Jian Shisan and Dao Wu, a hint of anger in his tone. If he had known how strong Duanling Tian was, and that Duanling Tian was an anomaly, he would never have treated him that way. A single misstep leads to eternal regret. This was the sword sect master's inner sentiment at this moment. Brother Dao and I previously thought that Duanling Tian had been taken away by a martial emperor powerhouse, so we didn't mention him much. Jian Shisan smiled. Bitterly, Dao Wu nodded. Forget it. Things have come to this point. It's irreversible. It's our blade and sword sect's misfortune to not be fated with him, nothing else. The blade sect master guessed the sword sect master's thoughts and shook his head, saying, How is that possible? Liansheng stared at the proud, purple figure standing in the air in the distance, his eyes filled with disbelief, constantly shaking his head, unwilling to believe that all of this was real. According to Su Li, he's only 28 years old. 28 years old, and he killed a void-prying stage 9th level martial artist who had comprehended the 9th level void-prying concept with 1 punch? Liansheng's heart rate gradually quickened, and it took a long time for him to calm down. With his strength, if he had attacked me earlier than Junior Sister Feng when I made my move against him, wouldn't I have been certain to die? Thinking of this, cold sweat broke out on Liansheng's forehead, and he no longer dared to harbor any thoughts of being an enemy of Duanling Tian. He was scared. Duanling Tian's terrifying strength completely destroyed the hatred he had built. Up in his heart towards Duanling Tian. Senior brother Ling Tian is so amazing. Yes, with just 1 punch, he killed that void-prying stage 9th level Sun Moon sect disciple who had comprehended the 9th level void-prying concept. Among the younger generation of our 5-element sect, only senior brother Ling Tian can do that. And that high-ranking member of the blade and sword sect just now seemed to say that their blade and sword sect has many young powerhouses and doesn't lack senior brother Ling Tian. Ridiculous. Among their blade and sword sect disciples, besides that red-clothed woman who admires senior brother Ling Tian, how can anyone else compare to senior brother Ling Tian? The 5 elements sect disciples discussed animatedly, and many of them looked mockingly at the sword sect master of the blade and sword sect, seemingly scoffing at his short-sightedness. The high-ranking members of the 5-element sect, apart from Guochong and Qi Yu, all had smiles on their faces. Even Huofeng's peak master, Cha Bai, who had a past grudge with Duanling Tian, seemed to have forgotten their conflict and showed a genuine smile on his face. That Chen Feng actually didn't believe me. Hu Fei stood aside, casting a distant glance at Chen Feng, the Sun Moon sect master, who had a grim expression, a cold sneer forming at the corner of his mouth. In his opinion, Chen Feng's loss to Duanling Tian this time was entirely his own fault. How is that possible? Chen Feng's face was as ugly as could be. He never expected that a five-element sect disciple who looked to be only around 25 years old would be so terrifying. With just one punch, he killed Lu Kai, who was ranked third among their Sun Moon sect's contemporary young generation. And this was even with Lu Kai using a Grade 2 Spirit Saber. The faces of several deputy sect masters of the Sun Moon sect, as well as a group of Sun Moon sect disciples, were also extremely grim. Among them, 2 Sun Moon sect disciples standing alone were looking at each other. "Do you have confidence?" One of them suddenly spoke, asking in a deep voice. "No. How about you?" The other shook his head, then asked in return. "No." The former also shook his head. Immediately, both fell silent. They were the 2 strongest among the Sun Moon sect's contemporary young generation, but they both failed to clearly see the punch thrown by that five-element sect disciple, Duani Ling Tian. Furthermore, facing Lu Kai, who was using a Grade 2 Spirit Saber and giving his all, neither of them dared to say they could kill him empty-handed. But Duanling Tian did it. So strong. On the Cloud Sky Temple's side, Xuanbei's eyes narrowed and his face showed shock. He never expected that, in just a few months, Duanling Tian's strength would have improved to such a degree. This makes it more interesting. However, thinking of the agreed battle between him and Duanling Tian, Xuanbei felt a surge of excitement and some anticipation. Evidently, he was not intimidated by the strength Duanling Tian displayed. Amitabha, congratulations, young benefactor Duan. Under everyone's watchful eyes, Abbot Hui Kong of Cloud Sky Temple slowly raised his hand, and 4 fragments shot out, directly heading for Duanling Tian. 9th level profundity fragments. Although they were mentally prepared, when they actually saw the 4 9th level profundity fragments land in Duanling Tian's hands, many people couldn't help but feel shocked, and their eyes turned completely red with envy. Those were 9th level profundity fragments. Even the most powerful forces among them possessed only a few of these fragments. And now, Duanling Tian, a mere young disciple of the five-element sect, had 4 9th-level profundity fragments, all to himself. Even many high-ranking officials from various major forces couldn't help but feel envy and jealousy. Many thanks, Master Hui Kong. Duanling Tian accepted the 4 9th-level profundity fragments, stored them one by one into his spatial ring, and at the same time thanked Hui Kong of Cloud Sky Temple. "Young benefactor Duan, you are too kind. It was merely a small effort," Hui Kong said indifferently. Duanling Tian nodded, then fixed his gaze on Chen Feng, the sect leader of the Sun Moon sect, whose face was ashen. He grinned. "Sect leader Chen Feng, thank you for your 2 9th-level profundity fragments." Chen Feng's already grim expression grew even darker. He sneered. "Duanling Tian, what if you did get those 2 9th-level profundity fragments? It only counts if you have the ability to keep them. Otherwise, in the end, you'll just be making wedding clothes for others." Chen Feng's words made the eyes of many disciples from Cloud Sky Temple, Blade and Sword Sect, and Sun Moon Sect light up. That's right. Duanling Tian had 4 9th-level profundity fragments in his possession. Once they entered the Martial Emperor's secret treasure, couldn't they just take them from him? Of course, as soon as this thought arose in most people's minds, it was ruthlessly shattered. What a joke. To snatch the 9th-level profundity fragments from Duanling Tian, one needed to have the strength. Otherwise, it would only be a suicide mission. Just now, the scene of Duanling Tian killing a 9th-level void-prying stage martial artist, who had comprehended the 9th-level void-prying profundity with a single punch, still echoed in their minds, lingering for a long time. Of course, there were also some stronger young disciples from the 3 major forces who secretly discussed the possibility of cooperation through their true energy. After all, Duanling Tian had a total of 4 9th-level profundity fragments. Even if 4 people teamed up to kill him, each would still get 1 9th-level profundity fragment in the end. After Chen Feng's words, Duanling Tian noticed the stirrings among many young disciples from the 3 major forces outside. The 5-element sect, but he didn't take it to heart. "Thank you for your concern, sect leader Chen Feng." Duanling Tian responded to Chen Feng in a calm tone, then surveyed the group of young disciples from the 3 major forces who were eyeing him covetously. "If anyone truly wants the 4 9th-level profundity fragments in my possession, I'd be very interested in getting to know them better." A brilliant and confident smile appeared on Duanling Tian's face. Hearing Duanling Tian's words and seeing the confident smile on his face, many young disciples immediately gave up the idea of dealing with Duanling Tian and seizing the 4 9th-level profundity fragments. Of course, there were also many exceptions. After all, the temptation of 4 9th-level profundity fragments was simply too great. Even though they knew Duanling Tian's strength was extraordinary, they still wanted to take a chance. As the saying goes, how can one catch tiger cubs without entering the tiger's den? Under everyone's gaze, Duanling Tian once again gathered with Feng Tianwu, Su Li, and Zhang Shouyang, and then called the three of them over to the group of people from the Five Element sect. Immediately after, Duanling Tian introduced Feng Tianwu and the other two to Guochong, Qiyu, Huang Danyu, and Shen Wei, and at the same time introduced Guochong and the four others to Feng Tianwu and her two companions. Sect leader Guo, Peak Master Qi. Feng Tianwu and the other two politely greeted Guochong and Qiyu, and also nodded and smiled at Huang Danyu and Shen Wei. I never heard Duanling Tian mention that he knew such a peerless genius as Miss Feng. From what I see, your strength is probably not inferior to Duanling Tian's, right? Qiyu looked at Feng Tianwu deeply, narrowed his eyes, and asked with a smile, Peak Master Qi, you flatter me. How could I possibly compare to Big Brother Duan? Feng Tianwu quickly replied modestly, Tianwu, don't be modest. When Lianxiong attacked me earlier, your speed was so fast that even I, unprepared, couldn't react in time. Duanling Tian shook his head. At that moment, the strength Feng Tianwu displayed had even shocked him. Unfortunately, by the time he fully reacted, Feng Tianwu had already withdrawn her true energy and fire profundity, so he didn't have time to use his spiritual force to investigate. But he was certain that Feng Tianwu's current strength was not weaker than his. With a thought, Duanling Tian's spiritual force immediately extended out, sweeping towards Feng Tianwu, intending to gauge her depth. The next moment, he detected Feng Tianwu's cultivation. It was better not to investigate. This investigation stunned Duanling Tian for a long time, leaving him standing there with vacant eyes, as if he had been possessed. Immediately after, Duanling Tian murmured to himself in a voice only he could hear, How is this possible? Tianwu. She's actually only a third-level void-prying stage martial artist? According to Duanling Tian's spiritual force investigation, Feng Tianwu's cultivation had not even entered the fourth-level void-prying stage. She was only at the third-level void-prying stage. A mere third-level void-prying stage martial artist could block Lianxiong for him? For a moment, he hesitated, but when he carefully recalled the scene of Feng Tianwu crippling the ice arm of Lianxiong, a disciple of the Blade and Sword sect, his spirits couldn't help but be roused again. Lianxiong was an 8th-level void-prying stage martial artist, who had comprehended the 8th-level intermediate sword profundity. Tianwu being able to sever his arm before he could react means her strength far surpasses his. But Tianwu is indeed only a 3rd-level void-prying stage martial artist. Could it be the fire profundity that Tianwu comprehended? Thinking of this, Duanling Tian completely confirmed his suspicion. Feng Tianwu was a fire spirit body, and the speed at which she comprehended fire profundity was incredibly fast. During her comprehension of fire profundity, she would hardly encounter any bottlenecks. Even more so, once she used fire profundity fragments to aid her comprehension, the speed at which she comprehended fire profundity would make all martial artists who were not innate spirit bodies feel ashamed. However, even with the aid of fire profundity fragments for cultivation, Tianwu shouldn't be able to defeat Lianxiong with only a 3rd-level void-prying stage cultivation, should she? The more Duanling Tian thought about it, the stranger it became. Lianxiong, an 8th-level void-prying stage martial artist, had comprehended the 8th-level intermediate sword profundity. Wielding a spirit sword, his power was comparable to over 270 ancient horned dragons. With Tianwu's 3rd-level void-prying stage cultivation, even using the 3rd-grade spirit whip he forged, she could at most unleash the power of 68 ancient horned dragons. A 3rd-level void prying stage martial artist, with all true energy unleashed, is comparable to the power of 40 ancient horned dragons. The 3rd-grade spirit whip he personally forged could increase power by 70%, which is 28 ancient horned dragons worth of power. Combined, that is exactly 68 ancient horned dragons worth of power. Which means, even if Tianwu comprehended the 1st-level high-grade fire profundity, adding 68 ancient horned dragons worth of power, it would still only be 268 ancient horned dragons worth of power, which is less than Lianxiong's. Unless Tianwu comprehended the 2nd-level high-grade fire profundity. In that case, with all her techniques unleashed, she would be comparable to 368 ancient horned dragons worth of power, enough to crush Lianxiong. With a shift in thought, Duanling Tian sorted out his thoughts. As he sorted out his thoughts, he couldn't help but gasp. If it was just with the aid of fire profundity fragments, Tian Wu couldn't have raised her fire profundity to such a level in such a short time. In that case, it can only be that profound connection array. The Blade and Sword sect also had a profound connection array. If it was the profound connection array that allowed Feng Tianwu to achieve such a transformation, then everything would not be surprising. The profound connection array is an inscription array created by the reincarnation Martial Emperor himself. For innate spirit bodies like Tianwu's fire spirit body, it has an effect far beyond what ordinary people can imagine. Duanling, Tian easily learned this after searching through the reincarnation Martial Emperor's memories. Moreover, according to the reincarnation Martial Emperor's judgment, the improvement of the profound connection array on innate spirit bodies far exceeded ordinary people's imagination. Which means Tianwu's fire profundity is very likely not just third-level high grade. At this thought, Duanling Tian secretly took a deep breath. Duanling Tian, I didn't expect you to know such a peerless beauty as Miss Feng. It's truly surprising. A voice entered Duanling Tian's ear, making him snap back to attention. It was Huang Dan Yu speaking to him. Don't tell me you thought everyone I knew was a big oaf like you. Duanling Tian rolled his eyes at Huang Dan Yu and said grumpily. Immediately, everyone nearby, including Guo Chong and Chi Yu, couldn't help but laugh, except for Duanling Tian and Huang Dan Yu. Whoosh! 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 Suddenly, faint gusts of wind howled from afar, clearly converging into two streams. Hearing the sound, the people from the four major forces present all looked over with focused eyes. With just a glance, everyone saw two groups of people majestically approaching them. In a moment, they arrived near them and stopped. It's the people from Azure Wolf Fort and the people from Heartbreak Sect. Immediately, many disciples of the Blade and Sword Sect and Cloud Sky Temple exclaimed in low voices. As four major forces in the area south of the Northern Desert, the people of the Blade and Sword Sect and Cloud Sky Temple knew far more about Azure Wolf Fort and Heartbreak Sect than the Five Element Sect from the area east of the Northern Desert, and the Sun Moon Sect from the area west of the Northern Desert. Azure Wolf Fort. Duanling Tian's gaze, as soon as the group from Azure Wolf Fort appeared, was fixed on four of the five leading figures, 3 old men and 1 middle-aged man, Meng Li, Ning Kan, Yu Kong, Feng Wei, 4 of the 5 vice fort masters of Azure. Wolf Fort, and also the people who had pursued him when he and the group from the Blade and Sword Sect left the ancient city in the Great Desert, preparing to return to the Blade and Sword Sect's stronghold. Meng Li and the other 3 naturally noticed Duanling Tian's gaze immediately. If it were in the past, they would have returned his gaze with contempt, but now, knowing the relationship between Duanling Tian and that little ancestor, they dared not do so. Of course, while they wouldn't deepen the conflict between Kang Wolf Fort and Duanling Tian, they also wouldn't proactively apologize to him. Not to mention that if they did, Zishang would be displeased and no longer fully exert himself for Kang Wolf Fort. Even Kang Wolf Fort itself couldn't afford to lose face in front of the people from the other major forces, so they chose to ignore him, completely and utterly ignoring Duanling Tian. However, their choice to ignore him did not mean they could extinguish Duanling Tian's anger. Duanling Tian's sharp gaze swept over Meng Li and the other 3, then landed on a white-robed young man behind them. Zishang! As Duanling Tian looked at Zishang, Zishang was also looking at him. Not only that, but as he looked over, Zishang's Yuan Li condensed voice had already timely entered his ears. Duanling Tian, I really didn't expect you to have such a tough life. 4 vice fort masters came out, and you actually managed to survive. Hearing Zishang's words, Duanling Tian's expression became terrifyingly grim. Although he had long suspected that Zishang was behind the 4 vice fort masters of Kong Wolf Fort, leading 10 Kong Wolf Fort elders to hunt him down, his emotions were still greatly affected after confirming it directly from Zishang's mouth, and his eyes flickered with cold light, filled with killing intent. Zishang, the Martial Emperor's secret treasure, will be your grave. Duanling Tian took a deep breath, calming his agitated emotions, then sent his Yuan Li condensed voice into Zishang's ear, devoid of any emotion. That's exactly what I wanted to say to you. What Duanling Tian didn't expect was that Zishang, who used to only admit defeat in front of him, was exceptionally tough this time, as if he was confident he could kill him. It seems your strength has improved significantly. Otherwise, you wouldn't be so confident, Duanling Tian sneered. Killing you is as easy as turning over my hand, Zishang replied coldly. I look forward to it. Duanling Tian's eyes blazed even brighter as he said each word distinctly. Amitabha. Vice Fort Master Luo, has Fort Master Qing not come? The abbot of Cloud Sky Temple, Hui Kong, looked at one of the elders among the 5 leading figures of Kang Wolf Fort, clasped his hands together, and asked. The latter was none other than Luo Fu, the head of Kangwol Fort's 5 vice fort masters, Abbot Huikong. Facing Huikong, the leader of Cloud Sky Temple, Luofu dared not be negligent and quickly replied, "Our fort master has encountered some matters recently, so he doesn't have time to come, even for a matter as significant as the marshals. Emperor's secret treasure. Fort Master Qing hasn't personally come. It seems the matters he's been busy with recently must be very important." Huikong's eyes flickered, and he said with a smile, "It is very important." Luofu nodded, but the corner of his mouth twitched imperceptibly. At this moment, the other 4 Kangwol Fort vice fort masters also looked a bit awkward. They couldn't imagine what expressions the people from the other 5 major forces present would have if they knew that the fort master of Kangwol Fort hadn't come because he was acting as a mount for a young girl. Of course, they couldn't possibly reveal this matter. Once revealed, not only would Kangwol Fort become the laughingstock of the northern desert land, but even the disciples of Kangwol Fort would probably be unable to accept this fact. Sectee. Master Pei, it's been many years, yet I didn't expect you to have already taken over as the sect master of the emotion-severing sect. This humble monk offers his respects. After greeting Luofu, Huikong looked at the leading figure among the emotion-severing sect group, a stern-faced, plainly dressed middle-aged man. The plain-clothed middle-aged man was none other than Pei An, the sect master of the emotion-severing sect. Abbot Huikong. Even when facing Huikong, the abbot of Cloud Sky Temple, Pei An's expression remained stern, and he nodded faintly, greeting him casually. However, Huikong was not displeased by this. After a slight smile, he stood there quietly. At the same time, the high-ranking officials of the 6 major forces present greeted each other. Time passed silently. Not long after, the sun set in the west, and the horizon was covered in a crimson sunset glow, making the entire world seem to be dyed red, appearing beautiful and magnificent. "Time's up." Suddenly, the high-ranking officials leading the 6 major forces exchanged glances, then swooped down together, entering the complex. Mountainous terrain. "Go!" Seeing this, Duanling Tian and the other young disciples of the 6 major forces hurriedly followed, not daring to delay. They knew that the Martial Emperor's secret treasure was about to open. On the way here, including Duanling Tian and the other 5-element sect disciples, the disciples of the 6 major forces had learned some information about the Martial Emperor's secret treasure from the high-ranking officials of their respective forces. The Martial Emperor's secret treasure has a specific opening time, only opening for 1 day. One must enter within that day, otherwise there will be no other chance to enter. Of course, there is a time limit for entering, but not for exiting. The inscription array at the entrance of the Martial Emperor's secret treasure only prohibits entry, not exit. Additionally, the Martial Emperor's secret treasure they were about to enter this time was said to be buried deep underground, surrounded by countless inscription arrays with powerful destructive capabilities. If anyone forcibly broke the exit, those inscription arrays with powerful destructive capabilities would activate on their own, thereby destroying the entire Martial Emperor's secret treasure in one fell swoop. In that case, the many treasures inside the Martial Emperor's secret treasure would also be permanently buried underground. Precisely because of this, the major forces aware of the Martial Emperor's secret treasure never dared to entertain the idea of forcing their way in. Wolfbo and could only honestly follow the rules set by that Martial Emperor expert, allowing young disciples under the age of 40 to enter and search for the profound meaning fragments they needed. Soon, led by the high-ranking officials of the 6 major forces, Duanling Tian and the other young disciples of the 6 major forces all arrived at a spacious valley, which was the valley directly below the high altitude they were just at. The valley was spacious, covered with forests, and showed nothing particularly special. The entrance to the Martial Emperor's secret treasure is here. Including Duanling Tian, all the young disciples of the 6 major forces were full of doubt. Duanling Tian raised an eyebrow, and his spiritual power extended out, quickly discovering a clue in a patch of forest within the valley. There was a strong aura of inscription arrays there. As someone who had integrated the reincarnation Martial Emperor's lifelong inscription memories, Duanling Tian had an extremely rich understanding of inscription arrays and easily recognized those few inscription arrays. There were a total of 5 inscription arrays. The topmost one was an inscription array that opened at a fixed time, only opening once with a specific time. Below this inscription array was an inscription array based on the age-measuring pearl. It was precisely the inscription array for verifying the age of entering martial artists. Not only that, but below this inscription array, there were 3 other inscription arrays. When Duanling Tian discovered them, he couldn't help but gasp. That martial emperor expert truly had great courage to actually set up such 3 killing arrays at the entrance and exit. Once these 3 killing arrays are activated, even a 9th level martial emperor realm expert would probably be directly annihilated. Duan Tian learned about the terrifying nature of these 3 killing arrays from the reincarnation martial emperor's memories. These 3 killing arrays, in addition to requiring incredibly precious materials, also required martial emperor realm level spiritual power to set up. Every interwoven inscription within them could only be carved by a martial emperor realm inscription master. It seems that martial emperor expert was very likely also an inscription master. Duan Tian thought to himself, "Brother Duan, what did you find?" Feng Tianwu, who was beside Duan Tian, was not only observing everything in the valley, but also occasionally looking at Duan Tian. She happened to notice Duan Tian's grave expression and immediately asked through Yuan Li condensed voice, Duan Tian nodded and replied through Yuan Li condensed voice, "If my senses aren't wrong, below that patch of forest is the entrance and exit of the martial emperor's secret treasure. There, besides an inscription array that opens at a fixed time and an inscription array that verifies the age of those entering, there are also 3 inscription arrays with extremely terrifying destructive power." As Duan Tian spoke, he looked towards the place where he sensed the inscription arrays. Almost as soon as Duan Tian finished speaking through Yuan Li condensed voice, the high-ranking officials of the 6 major forces tacitly arrived above that patch of forest, then simultaneously took action, clearing out the entire forest. Each of the high-ranking officials of the 6 major forces was in existence above the void transformation realm. They manipulated Yuan Li and artistics, conception into blades, clearing out that patch of forest in moments. After the forest was cleared, a magnificent gate lying on the ground appeared before everyone's eyes. The gate was embedded in the ground, massive and ancient in design, not stained with a single speck of dust, giving off an extreme sense of antiquity. The sense of antiquity that came rushing forward seemed to be narrating the long years of the gate's existence. Then what should we do? Are we still going in? Hearing Duan Tian's words, a hint of wariness appeared on Feng Tianwu's beautiful face. Don't worry. Those 3 killing arrays only target those who force their way in and those over 40 years old. Under other circumstances, those 3 killing arrays will not activate. Duan Tian comforted her. Feng Tianwu understood upon hearing this. So that's how it is. This is the entrance and exit to the martial emperor's secret treasure. This gate looks extremely ancient. I wonder how many years it has existed. The young disciples of the 6 major forces followed behind the high-ranking officials of their respective forces, looking down at the giant gate embedded in the ground. While discussing amongst themselves, their faces were filled with curiosity. The martial emperor's secret treasure beneath this gate is said to have existed for 1,000 years. The martial emperor expert who left this secret treasure passed away 1,000 years ago. Hearing the discussions of the young disciples from the various major forces, Luo Fu, the head of Kang Wolf Fort's 5 vice fort masters, slowly explained, 1,000 years? Immediately, all the young disciples from the major forces, including Duan Tian, couldn't help but be startled, setting up an inscription formation to ensure that the secret treasure I left behind would open after 1,000 years. What kind of powerful method is this? Apart from Duan Tian and the high-ranking officials of various forces who already knew all of this through other channels, everyone else was shocked, their eyes filled with disbelief. The power of a martial emperor powerhouse was beyond their imagination. Even Zhang Yan, who had been quietly standing behind Pei An without any sense of presence, was now slightly moved. This Zhang Yan seems a bit different from last time. Earlier, when the people from the emotion-severing sect first arrived, Duan Tian casually glanced at Zhang Yan a few times and didn't pay much attention, so he hadn't noticed the subtle changes in Zhang Yan. But now, upon closer inspection, he immediately noticed something amiss. Compared to a few months ago, Zhang Yan now seemed to possess a unique, ineffable temperament. Duan Tian vaguely realized that something might have happened to Zhang Yan in the past few months. Out of curiosity, Duan Tian extended his spiritual energy, sweeping towards Zhang Yan, and immediately detected Zhang Yan's cultivation base, 7th level of the void prying stage. A few months ago, Zhang Yan's cultivation was at the 6th level of the void prying stage, so Duan Tian was not surprised by his breakthrough to the 7th level of the void prying stage. After all, Zhang Yan was different from him. Zhang Yan had long since left the Dahan dynasty and came to the northern desert outside this domain, even joining the emotion-severing sect and becoming Pei An's disciple. During Zhang Yan's cultivation, he certainly wouldn't lack various spirit fruits specifically for void prying stage martial artists. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for him to have a cultivation base at the 6th level of the void-prying stage a few months ago. Having consumed a large number of spirit fruits, specifically for void-prying stage martial artists, previously also meant that unless Zhang Yan could later obtain spirit fruits, specifically for void-prying stage martial artists that he had never consumed before, he would no longer be able to rely on the medicinal power of spirit fruits to enhance his cultivation. Did I misinterpret something? Duanling Tian frowned, then relaxed. Just now, while sensing an ineffable unique temperament on Zhang Yan, he also felt a hint of danger from Zhang Yan. It was as if Zhang Yan could pose a threat to him. When his spiritual energy detected Zhang Yan's current cultivation, his first thought was that his senses had erred. Zhang Yan, at the 7th level of the void-prying stage, could not possibly pose a threat to him. After all, not everyone was Feng Tianwu. Why hasn't this martial Emperor's secret treasure opened yet? Half an hour later, Tian Gu, the Earth Peak Master of the Five-Element sect, frowned slightly, asking somewhat puzzled. And almost at the instant Tian Gu's voice fell, a clearly visible translucent light barrier appeared on the outer side of the magnificent gate embedded in the ground, enveloping the entire gate. Whoosh! Seeing this suddenly appearing translucent light barrier, the people present couldn't help but burst into an uproar. Is this the inscription formation? It should be. The young disciples of the 6 major forces discussed animatedly, their gazes filled with curiosity as they looked at the translucent light barrier. A secular disciple of Yunkong Temple even curiously flew forward, reaching out to touch the translucent light barrier as if wanting to test its texture. The Yunkong Temple disciple's speed was so fast that no one else could react. By the time Duanling Tian reacted, the secular disciple of Yunkong Temple had already touched the translucent light barrier, even immersing his hand into it. Duanling Tian shook his head. He knew that this Yunkong Temple disciple was finished. At this moment, Duanling Tian could clearly sense that the first of the other 3 killing formations had suddenly stirred, clearly being triggered and activated. Stop! The high-ranking officials of the 6 major forces reacted one after another, and Hui Kong, the abbot of Yunkong Temple, his face changing, exclaimed in alarm, completely losing his previous calm demeanor. Hui Kong's alarmed shout startled many young disciples from various forces, causing them to shiver. Abbot, this light barrier can... Hearing Hui Kong's alarmed shout, the secular disciple of Yunkong Temple, whose hand had passed through the light barrier, seemed unaware of the danger and instead looked at Hui Kong as if seeking praise. It was as if he wanted to say to Hui Kong, Abbot, I've tried it. This light barrier can be passed through. However, before he could finish his sentence, the entire valley suddenly shook violently, as if an incredibly severe earthquake had occurred, interrupting his words. The secular disciple of Yunkong Temple's face changed. At this moment, even if he was an idiot, he realized that he had caused trouble. Without any hesitation, he quickly pulled his hand back from inside the translucent light barrier. Unfortunately, it was already too late. Those present didn't even see any power appear. Yet the secular disciple of Yunkong Temple's body suddenly stiffened and then exploded with a bang, turning into a rain of blood. It was fortunate that those nearby retreated in time. Otherwise, they would have been splattered with blood. Even so, the young disciples of the various major forces couldn't help but gasp. And when they looked at the translucent light barrier covering the gate again, their eyes held a hint of fear and dread. Disciples of Yunkong Temple, listen to my command. Unless this light barrier disappears on its own, no one is to approach it. Hui Kong's face was somewhat grim as he warned the other disciples of Yunkong Temple, and the high-ranking officials of the other 5 major forces, including the Five-Element sect, also warned their disciples one by one. The young disciples of various forces nodded in agreement without any hesitation. Even without the reminder, they wouldn't dare to approach the translucent light barrier now. In their eyes, the translucent light barrier was no different from a monstrous flood. After the secular disciple of Yunkong Temple touched the translucent light barrier, his body inexplicably exploded. The lesson from this precedent filled them with dread from the bottom of their hearts. Brother Duan, is that the power of the killing formation? Feng Tianwu's Yuan force condensed into sound, entering Duanling Tian's ears, clearly tinged with a hint of fear. Yes. Duanling Tian nodded in response. And that's just the power of the first of the 3 killing formations. My spiritual energy can sense that the other 2 more powerful killing formations have not been activated. More powerful killing. Formations? How powerful? Feng Tianwu was startled by Duanling Tian's words. It's hard for me to describe exactly how powerful. Let's put it this way. Among these 3 killing formations, the 3rd one at the very bottom, once activated, even a 9th level Martial Emperor powerhouse would likely follow in the footsteps of that secular disciple of Yunkong Temple. Just now. After a moment of contemplation, Duanling Tian responded to Feng Tianwu with his Yuan force condensed into sound, his tone filled with solemnity. The third killing formation, once activated, could even instantly kill a 9th level. Martial Emperor Powerhouse? Feng Tianwu's face instantly turned pale. In her opinion, how powerful were Martial Emperor powerhouses? Even the Blade and Sword sect, which went to great lengths for the Martial Emperor's secret treasure, this time, was also to obtain profound fragments to allow Martial Emperor powerhouses to emerge within the sect. And the newly born Martial Emperor powerhouses were only at the first level Martial Emperor stage. Such beings were like ants before a 9th level. Martial Emperor powerhouse, not worth mentioning, but the killing formation at the entrance of the Martial Emperor's secret treasure could even instantly kill a 9th level Martial Emperor powerhouse, let alone the group of martial artists present who hadn't even stepped into the Martial Emperor stage. As the secular disciple of Yun Kong Temple died, the entire spacious valley returned to calm, but soon another loud noise spread out. Many people were startled and instinctively flinched. Rumble! Under everyone's watchful eyes, the gate, enveloped by the translucent light barrier, slowly opened, revealing its true appearance beneath. Below the gate, a high platform appeared before everyone's eyes. On one side of the high platform there was a stone staircase that stretched endlessly, leading deep underground, appearing pitch black when viewed from above. As for the other 3 sides, all that met the eye was profound and vast, like a bottomless abyss. Anti-air formation? Just as most people's attention was focused on the platform and the stone stairs, Duanling Tian's spiritual energy, which had extended through the 5 inscription formations, clearly sensed the aura of inscription formations emanating around the platform. It was precisely the anti-air formation. The anti-air formation is a type of inscription formation, where martial artists above the void stage, upon entering it, can no longer fly through the air, unless their own power can transcend the shackles of the inscription formation. Otherwise, within the anti-air formation, you can only honestly walk on the ground. This anti-air formation should also have been left behind by that Martial Emperor powerhouse. In this way, even a 9th level Martial Emperor powerhouse, once inside, can only honestly walk on the ground. Duanling Tian thought to himself, although among the high-ranking officials of the 6 major forces present, there were many inscription masters who could more or less sense the aura of the anti-air formation they couldn't identify what kind of inscription formation it was. After all, they were not like Duanling Tian, who possessed the reincarnation Martial Emperor's lifelong inscription memories. The reincarnation Martial Emperor, having lived 2 lives, had thoroughly researched inscription formations to the extreme in his second life. Not only did he create many inscriptions and inscription formations himself, but he also understood all common inscriptions and inscription formations on the Cloud Continent. Of course, there were also some more obscure inscriptions and inscription formations that the reincarnation Martial Emperor had only heard of, and did not know the specific methods of engraving and arrangement. Just like the separation and combination inscription formation that Duanling Tian obtained in the Sword Emperor's treasure vault, which could temporarily split a spirit sword into 9 and combine 9 into 1. The reincarnation Martial Emperor did not know how to engrave or arrange it. With my current spiritual energy at the 2nd level of the void transformation stage, I wonder how many swords I can control if I cultivate the 9 Tribulations sword control art. Thinking of the Sword Emperor's treasure vault, Duanling Tian's heart stirred. He then remembered that when he obtained the quasi-emperor grade spirit sword and 3 profound fragments in the Sword Emperor's treasure vault, he also obtained a set of sword techniques left behind by that white-robed Sword Emperor, the 9 Tribulations sword control art. To cultivate the 9 Tribulations sword control art, one must possess powerful spiritual energy to simultaneously control 9 swords flying through the air and perfectly execute them. So, following these stone steps down leads to the Martial Emperor's secret treasure? It should be. I was wondering what would be behind this magnificent gate embedded in the ground, but I didn't expect it to be a solitary high platform. We'll pass through the gate and land on the high platform, then follow the stone steps all the way down. As for what's at the end of the steps, we have no idea. The unknown is the most terrifying. It seems that after entering the Martial Emperor's secret treasure, we'll have to proceed with extreme caution. The young disciples of the various major forces were discussing animatedly, most of them with a hint of apprehension in their brows. Some even entertained thoughts of retreating. However, as soon as the thought of retreating arose, they remembered the numerous treasures within the Martial Emperor's secret treasure, and their spirits were instantly revitalized, completely dispelling any thoughts of backing down. Fortune favors the bold. If one doesn't even have the courage to take risks, they are destined for a mediocre life. As long as I can obtain more than 2 profundity fragments, I'll soar to great heights. Among the various forces, many young disciples murmured to themselves, saying the same words. It seems that the distribution of profundity fragments is the same for other forces as it is for our 5-element sect. Huang Danyu, standing not far from Duanling Tian, chuckled. That's only natural. Otherwise, who would risk their lives for profundity fragments? Duanling Tian said indifferently. In his opinion, to motivate their disciples, the major forces had to understand the art of compromise. The gate to the Martial Emperor's secret treasure is open. Shouldn't we go in? Someone said, but no one dared to be the first to step forward. Everyone's gaze fell on the translucent light barrier covering the open gate. Ever since the lay disciple of Cloud Sky Temple was blasted to death, this translucent light barrier had become a shadow in their hearts. As long as the light barrier didn't disappear, they would not take half a step beyond the forbidden zone. Whoosh! Suddenly, a light sound was heard. Immediately after, under everyone's watchful eyes, the translucent light barrier vanished into thin air as if it had never existed. It finally disappeared. If it didn't disappear, I doubt anyone would dare to enter. The young disciples of the various forces breathed a sigh of relief at this sight. Should we go in now? At the same time, many young disciples from various forces looked at the high-ranking members of their respective forces, their eyes filled with questions. Before the high-ranking members of the various forces could speak, another layer of gray. Light barrier appeared out of nowhere over the open gate, causing everyone except Duanling Tian to change their expressions. Seeing everyone's faces, Duanling Tian was momentarily speechless. It's just a formation of inscriptions. To check the age of those who enter? Is there really a need for such a big reaction? Duanling Tian thought to himself. As soon as the translucent light barrier disappeared, he had already sensed that another formation of inscriptions for checking age had been activated. What exactly is going on? Now the gate is open, and the translucent light barrier has disappeared. So why is there another layer of gray light barrier? This gray light barrier, it won't also kill you on contact like the previous translucent light barrier. Will it? The young disciples of the various forces looked worried. No one dared to try. Even the high-ranking members of the major forces mostly showed apprehension. Let's go. Duanling Tian called out to Feng Tianwu, Huang Danyu, Su Li, and Zhang Shouyong beside him, then stepped into the air and moved directly towards the gray light barrier with extreme speed. In a moment, Duanling Tian was near the gray light. Barrier! Seeking death! Seeing Duanling Tian's action, Zishang and Hu Fei's lips curled into a cold sneer, both believing Duanling Tian was certainly doomed. Duanling Tian. Xuanbei, standing among the Cloud Sky Temple group, and Zhang Yan, standing among the dispassionate sect group, raised their eyebrows, both startled by Duanling Tian's action. The high-ranking members of the 5-element sect, except for Tian. Gu, who was deep in thought, all changed their expressions. This young fellow is too reckless. Guozhong and Qi Yu's faces were grim. By this time, Duanling Tian had already touched the gray light barrier. Even if the gray light barrier truly had a problem, they wouldn't have time to rescue him. Just when most people thought Duanling Tian was about to be blasted to death, Duanling Tian, however, passed through the layer of gray light barrier smoothly, as if nothing had happened. Through the setting sun, which cast a blood-red glow over the earth, everyone saw the dark figure behind the gray light barrier. Land steadily on the platform inside. Duanling Tian is fine. It seems the gray light barrier has no killing power whatsoever. The disciples of the various forces suddenly understood, and before others had fully realized, a figure like a fire spirit had already followed Duanling Tian, passing through the gray light barrier, through the gate, and entering inside. It was Feng Tianwu. While Su Li, Zhang Shouyong, and Huang Danyu were startled by Duanling Tian's actions, only Feng Tianwu followed him like a shadow, showing her unconditional trust in Duanling Tian. I really didn't expect that we big men are not even as good as a woman. Huang Danyu smiled bitterly and shook his head, then followed suit. Su Li and Zhang Shouyong exchanged glances, both showing bitter smiles, and then together passed through the gray light barrier, stepping onto the mysterious high platform beneath. The gate. I understand. At this moment, Tian Gu, the Earth Peak master of the 5-element sect, exclaimed in a low voice, "This gray light barrier is precisely the formation of inscriptions that checks the age of those who enter." As soon as Tian Gu said this, the group of inscription masters present suddenly understood. At the same time, they couldn't help but wonder why Duanling Tian knew that the gray light barrier would not harm him. Could it be that he was also an inscription master? If he truly was an inscription master, how profound must his attainments in the way of inscriptions be to be the first to react among all the inscription masters present? Whoosh! Soon, another person from the 5-element sect followed through the gray light barrier and entered. It was Nan Gongchen. Since Nan Gongchen went in, Nan Gong Yi naturally followed. Following closely, the disciples of the 5-element sect entered one by one, looking as if they were dumplings being dropped into a pot. He's just lucky. Zishang stood behind the 5 deputy fort masters of Kang Wolf Fort, his face exceedingly gloomy. He had originally thought Duanling Tian would be blasted to death by the inscription formation at the entrance of the Martial Emperor's secret treasure. But to his surprise, not only was Duanling Tian not blasted to death, he became the first person to enter, stealing all the limelight. What's the rush? You can go in now and just kill him, can't you? A sinister, hoarse, and ancient voice echoed in Zishang's mind, tempting him. Zishang's eyes lit up at the words, kill. Without waiting for the 5 deputy fort masters of Kang Wolf Fort to say anything, Zishang flew out, plunged into the grey light barrier, and entered the Martial Emperor's secret treasure. An astonishing killing intent permeated his body. Below the grey light barrier, on the high platform beneath the open magnificent gate, a group of 5 element sectae. Disciples led by Duanling Tian stood on the platform, curiously observing their surroundings. Feng Tian Wu, Su Li, and Zhang Shouyong also stood by Duanling Tian's side. The platform was square, and in 3 directions, all that met the eye was pitch black, boundless, and infinitely deep, stretching. As far as the eye could see, like a bottomless abyss, only in the last direction was there a stone staircase leading downwards. This stone staircase, as far as the eye can see, has no end. I wonder where it leads. Huang Danyu frowned, muttering to himself, no matter where it leads, we have no choice. We can only follow it down, Duanling Tian said. How about we fly down from the other 3 sides and see? Su Li suggested. Fly? Hearing Su Li's words, Duanling Tian smiled bitterly. From the moment they stepped onto this high platform, they had already entered the range covered by the forbidden flight formation. Want to fly? You can, as long as you have strength comparable to a Martial Emperor expert. Just as Duanling Tian was about to explain, his expression changed, as if he had sensed something, and he suddenly looked up, staring at a spot not far in the air ahead. There, a white figure appeared, instantly transforming into a white lightning bolt, streaking directly towards him. Zishang! Duanling Tian's face changed, and he immediately recognized the white-clothed young man rushing towards him as Zishang. He never expected Zishang's speed to be so astonishing. In the blink of an eye, he was in front of him. Boom! A thunderous explosion of air sounded as Zishang, who had reached Duanling Tian, raised his hand and punched out. Flames surged on his fist, accompanied by gusts of fierce green gale growing even stronger. The punch was like a collapsing mountain, shooting straight towards Duanling Tian with such speed that Duanling Tian had no time to block it, and could only instinctively push off the ground and retreat quickly, seeking death. Almost at the same time, a sharp cry sounded, and it was Feng Tianwu, who was standing not far away, who moved. Her entire body was enveloped in a soaring flame, as if she had transformed into a true fire spirit, streaking towards Zishang, who was chasing Duanling Tian. Whoosh! A long whip, like a red spirit snake, shot directly at Zishang's punching hand. And at this moment, under everyone's watchful eyes, Duanling Tian and Zishang, who had leaped off the high platform, swayed and rapidly fell out of control, as if they were about to fall into the bottomless abyss. At the same time, the long whip shot from Feng Tianwu's hand also missed. Zishang's rapid descent was beyond her expectation. Brother Duan! Feng Tianwu, standing at the edge of the high platform, looked at the purple figure gradually disappearing into the bottomless abyss. Her face changed, and then, without even thinking, she leaped down after him. As she jumped down, she finally realized why her brother Duan and that Zishang had fallen out of control. It turned out that, in this place, no matter how one activated their elemental energy, they couldn't fly in the air. Miss Tianwu, Su Li, Zhang Shouyong, and Huang Danyu's faces changed drastically. They stood on one side of the high platform looking at Feng Tianwu, who had fallen after them, completely unaware of what had happened. Huh? Why can't I fly here? At the same time, a surprised voice entered their ears, instantly striking them like lightning.